What is going on, guys? It is Hart. Today I'll be breaking down the 10-game NBA slate here for Wednesday night on DraftKings. Let's get right into it. I'll be talking through my favorite plays, core plays, all the good stuff in this video. So make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. And as I said, let's get right into it. 10-game slate here for tomorrow. Wizards, Cavs leading us off here, 9-point spread, 239.5 game totals. Great game environment, even though there's blowout risk. Bucks, Pacers, 2.5-point spread, 258.5. So obviously that's another fantastic one there. Same thing with the Thunder and Hawks, 1.5-point spread, almost a 249 game total there. Nets, Rockets, 6.5-point spread, 223. Raptors, Grizz, 1.5-point spread, 231.5. Pacers, Pelicans, 223.5. Blazers, Mavs, blowout risk there, 234. Bulls, Knicks, 220.5. Clippers, Suns, 2.5-point spread, 233. Pistons, Jazz, 239.5. Heat, Lakers, 226.5. And then Magic, Kings, 233. So a lot of interesting games, a lot of good games to target. Starting off here, obviously Milwaukee versus Indiana. A little bit of beef between both teams because of that Giannis ball situation. So Giannis 11.9K. If you feel good with the value across the board for this slate tomorrow, 10 games, there should be some value that opens up. Hopefully, if you do, if you want to pay up for Giannis, that's going to be the little bit more contrarian way to go here. Just with such a large slate, usually ends up being a little bit more balanced than usual. Only kind of one star ends up in the lineup most of the time. Obviously, every slate is different, but yeah, Giannis don't mind paying up for him, but I'd rather get to Dame here. A couple rough games there back to back, shooting the ball 9-16. Still, obviously solid 56%, but 38 minutes, 3-16. Obviously, a terrible game there. So I like buying low on Dame here. 8.8K going against Indiana. Absolutely fantastic spot here to buy into Dame. Middleton is questionable here for this game due to his right knee injury management and the left wrist sprain. So we'll have to see if he plays. If he does, I think he's a solid play at 7.3K. He's finally seen low 30s minutes. He's been productive. If he's out, that's obviously just a little bit more usage to guys like Giannis, Dame, Lopez, and then off the bench, a guy like Bobby Portis. Beasley, I think it's a fine play, fine GP play. As you can see, very score independent, so you really need him to hit his threes, but he should be playing mid-30s minutes. Off the bench, if there's no if there's no Middleton, should see more Pat Connaughton, who's, I guess, a fine value play. No Crowder, so we'll see some Beauchamp and Payne as well, but nothing too crazy there. On the Indiana side, obviously, Tyrese Halliburton at 10.2K is definitely way too cheap here still. He's really turned it on the past 5 games after having like a little bit of a lull there in terms of scoring, 19-8, 19-17. He's really turned it on the past 5-6 games, as you can see. So once again, he looks like a fantastic option here against the Milwaukee defense. Turner, always a solid, mid-range play there at center. Bruce Brown is questionable. If he's good to go, that'll knock Nembhard out of the starting lineup. But if he's out, once again, Nembhard will start alongside Halliburton, but also Nembhard is questionable. So we'll have to keep an eye out on the news here. We could have 2 guys out of the starting lineup right now for the Pacers, which could open up some value. A guy like Naismith got the start last game. A guy like Benedict Mathurin could probably get slid in the starting lineup. Jalen Smith's been starting, hasn't been the best. So there is a little bit of interest here in the wings here, but it's kind of one of those more wait and see approach there with the Brown and Nembhard in this situation. Washington versus Cleveland. As I always say, if the game stays close, it's usually because Kyle Kuzma, as you can see here, the past 2 games, really solid for him fantasy point wise. So I think he's fine. I'm never going to go out of my way to play Kuzma unless it's a great matchup that's not going to blow out. And he is cheap enough to where I like it. And I don't know if that's ever going to happen this season. Poole has been terrible. Gafford's fine there. They're going to need his heights going against the Cavs big. And Jared Allen. Jones, he's all over the place. I think he's a fine play at 6.1. Denny, the same thing. Nothing too crazy here with these guys. Denny's had 2 great games back to back, but before that, his minutes were all over the place. So it's really hard to trust these Wizards guys. Not much to like here, especially if the blowout slip, if you want to go that route. There's not even much to really like in terms of that, in terms of value. So Wizards are more so just to stay away from me. I just don't think there's a need to get to any of them. None of them really stand out point per dollar wise. They're really just, they're really dart throws, all of them. On the Cleveland side here, obviously fantastic matchup. Absolutely love Donovan Mitchell here at 9.5K with no Garland, with no Mobley. Jared Allen's been an absolute beast, as you can see here the past 4 games since those guys being out. 7.8K, pretty expensive for him, but he's been very, very productive recently. So don't mind landing on him. Strus still kind of pricey for his production. He's been very bad recently and kind of overall this season, I'd say. So I think he's a fine GPP play. Same thing with Karis LeVert. I'd rather get to LeVert than Strus, even though Strus is getting more minutes. Okoro, I think it's a fine play. Should see around 30 minutes, maybe a little bit more. He's been okay production-wise this year, which is kind of surprising. Porter Jr. should play maybe anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes, kind of over the board. Don't really trust him. Wade should probably get the start again. He's kind of been getting limited. Not a lot to like here. Niang's fine value if you really need it down there. and they will play some Merrill. So if he gets hot from the floor, he could definitely pay off his price tag 3.4K. Moving on to OKC versus Atlanta. I mean, SGA is him. Once again, a pretty cheap price tag for a guy who absolutely goes off. Chat, a little bit pricey, but still very, very solid play here. He's pretty much averaging like 40 fantasy points per game. Jalen Williams, a little bit too pricey for me. That price tag is 7.3K. Rather pay up for Chat or SGA, who are the safer floor and higher ceiling. Giddey, been great the past 2 games. Tonight almost went for a triple double like the previous game. So once again, he has GPP upside, but the minutes have still not been great on him. Lou Dort price a little bit up a little bit, coming off a solid game there, almost 30 fantasy points. Once again, I think he's a fine GPP play if you land on him. In terms of value, it's kind of the same thing as last night. I prefer getting to Kendrick Williams. Isaiah Joe's the best scorer out of the bench guys there, but they'll run like 11-man rotation, so nothing crazy, so nothing really appealing to me. Atlanta side here, solid matchup. Trae Young, I mean, he's been averaging like 30 and 10 the past like 20 games, so he looks like a really solid spend up. DeJounte Murray, I do like his price, 7.7K, kind of the cheapest we're getting him all season so far. He has good upside, so I do have interest in him at 7.7K. Bogdanovich, I still think he's a fine play. Should see around 30 minutes. He's been super aggressive, kind of scoring dependent recently, so I think he's fine. Clint Capella, been very productive recently. If you land on him, don't mind it. Jalen Johnson, probably my favorite play besides DeJounte Murray on this team here. Seen big minutes the past 2 games, and he's been very, very productive. Double-double in the past 2 games, almost 3 in a row. So 6.3K for him is a very intriguing price tag for a very high-energy, super productive guy. Sadiq Bey, I just don't think there's a need to land on him unless you're trying to get very different and cute with this team. I think I'd rather get to DeJounte, rather get to Jalen Johnson, who both pretty much have safer floors and higher ceilings. So you're not really getting him at a discount compared to those guys, even with Hunter out. Kungwu, still kind of pricey for me, even though he's, minutes have been up a little bit, but still his production's kind of dropped. That's really it for the Atlanta side. Moving on to Toronto versus Memphis here. Toronto side, Scotty and Pascal are going to lead this team. They do have the addition of Quickly, who I still think is too cheap here. Only saw 28 minutes. That's because he had massive foul trouble there in the first half, so they kind of limited him a good amount. But 6,400, I still think is too cheap. He's going to be playing 30-plus minutes as a starting point guard. He'll probably land around that 7.7K to 7.5K probably for the rest of the season, unless he really goes off. So once again, really like Quickly there. Shooting guard, point guard eligible, which is really nice. Pascal, he's going to step up a little bit more offensively. As you can see, he's been really solid the past 5 games. So I think he's coming at a pretty interesting price tag and a good matchup. Barrett does feel a little cheap here, but I do think, once again, the team's going to go through Pascal and Scotty, and then Quickly is going to be a really solid shooting guard. And then Barrett, I just don't think he fits in with this team. So for me, more of a stay away. Portal, fine if you land on him. It's just the minutes, right? If he plays the minutes, he can easily go off. Schroeder should come off the bench, play mid-20s minutes, maybe close to 30. We'll kind of have to wait and see kind of what the minutes are like with Schroeder. He did see 30, but there was a lot of foul trouble there for Quickly, so maybe his minutes get kind of limited to low 20s. I still think he's a fine GPP play. Don't love it, though. Trent did get the start. I think he's fine, 5.4K, pretty score independent. And off the bench, we should see guys like McDaniels and Boucher. I think they're fine dart throws if you're looking for some value. They should see some minutes there, kind of being the main bigs off the bench. Not going to see a ton of Thaddeus Young yet, unless there might be an injury. Moving on to Memphis side here. They just played tonight. Ja did get hurt, but he did come back in the second half. So I don't think he'll rest, but we'll have to wait and see, possibly with the back-to-back. But 9.8K from Ja is a great price tag to get him at. Bane, don't love the price tag. He's a fine play. Same thing with Jaren Jackson Jr. They're kind of there. Marcus Smart is still intriguing at the price. As you can see, he had a terrible game tonight, 1 of 7. Luke Kennard, I still think is a really solid value. Should see around 20-ish minutes, which is kind of limiting his upside. But if he hits his shots, as you can see the past 2 games, 4.4K, solid value play. That's really it for me. D Rose did get hurt his thigh, did not come back. So not much else there for Memphis. On the Pelican side here, do really like Brandon Ingram, Zion, and CJ if you're looking to get contrarian for like mid-range guys. Once again, I think CJ's price is the best of all 3. But otherwise, I think they're more strong secondary options. J-Val, the minutes have not been great, right? They're kind of trending down for him. Did lose a few because of the blowouts there. Trey Murphy's out, so it just means a little bit more secure minutes for Herb Jones. Once again, the blowout risk kind of did ruin the minutes for most of these guys. Larry Nance, 20 minutes, once again, put up 20 fantasy points. So he's been looking like a solid guy, but he's priced up to 4.5K now. Kind of in that awkward range of like not too cheap for a value play, but there's also way better center options to get to. So don't know if I want to be doing 2 centers today on the slate. Najee Marshall should see more minutes with there being no Trey Murphy. I think he's, once again, kind of priced up out of the range for me. Moving on to Memphis here. Anthony Edwards has been fantastic the past few games here. So I like buying in on him. 9.1K is a pretty cheap price tag. Same thing with Carl Towns coming in at a pretty cheap price tag, 7.8, coming off a few rough games there, dealing with the injury, but 7.8K for Towns is definitely cheap. The lowest we've gotten him on all season. So definitely load up on him and Anthony Edwards in a good matchup here against the Pelicans. Rest of the team, just kind of there for me. Really no need to get to any of these guys. McDaniels should play a good amount of minutes, so I don't mind him at 4.7K. It's kind of like a higher end value guy that should play a good amount of minutes, even though he's not the most productive offensively. Moving on to Claxton here in the Nets. They absolutely got blown out tonight, so they all did terrible. But yeah, Claxton, 7.3K. Don't love the price tag. It's just the minutes, right? Like if he can secure those minutes, I think that'd be a very solid price tag, but just can't trust the minutes. Mikal Bridges, terrible tonight. Don't mind buying low on him. Same thing with Dinwiddie and Cam Thomas. They both combined to go, I think it was 0 of 17 or 18. They're both god awful. So once again, don't mind loading up on them. It's DFS. It happens. So you can definitely load back up on them. They're coming at pretty cheap price tags. Obviously, Dinwiddie's way safer, but Cam Thomas is definitely there as a shooting guard off the bench. Cam Johnson, I think is a fine GPP option. Not really get him at a price tag discount. DFS is there. That's really it. It's really just kind of the main guys for me: Bridges, Claxton, Dinwiddie. Moving on to Houston here. Sengun's been absolutely amazing this season. 8.9K. I think it's a fine price tag for him. Van Fleet is playing huge minutes. So once again, I think he's okay play. Green, Smith, they're about there. Eason, 6.2K. I mean, they're all kind of priced about right. No one really stands out to me unless we get the news that, Eason's possibly out once again. Then we could get a little bit of value with like Tate or possibly like a Jeff Green starting. But otherwise, I just stick with the main guys. But I really don't think that there's a need to get to any of the Houston guys there. For the Portland game here, big news is Anthony Simons. Looks like he's been upgraded, the illness. So if he's good to go, no minutes limit, absolutely love him at the price tag 8.3K. Should play about 40 minutes. Should shoot the ball about 40 times. Not 40. Around 20, 15, 20 times as well. So that's a great price tag to get him at, even though there's blowout risk. If he's out, once again, Malcolm Brogdon, who was absolutely god-awful there, they got blown out by like 40 against Phoenix. He'd be a really strong play, kind of like Anthony Simons plays. You can see the past 3 games, he's been very productive there when he is the main guard. So a lot of interest in both these guys. If they're both good to go, I prefer getting to Simons. Brogdon would be a fine play, but obviously if Simons is out, Brogdon becomes pretty much a lock for me, even though there's pretty big blowout risk here. Grant would be the kind of secondary scorer alongside Brogdon, which I think he'd be a solid play at 7.3K. Ayton is still out. They've been missing guys like Reef and Moses Brown. So if those guys are good to go, we could get some value here at center, whether it's Moses Brown, who has been starting, but he's not seeing extended minutes. So I do think I'd feel safer getting to a Reef here, who is way more productive off the bench, or a guy like Kamara, who should be playing solid minutes. So some interesting stuff to see there. Obviously, if those guys are out, Jabari Walker should pick up the power forward center minutes there. They're kind of to go a little bit smaller, and then Baji did get that run there with those guys being out. So a little bit of news here in terms of the center. We might get some value in terms of Portland. So hopefully we get that news soon. Luka looks like a great spend up option if you find some other value on the slate that you do like. Kyrie's coming in at a very cheap price tag. He's not on the minutes limit, so he came back from that injury, played full minutes. Obviously, it blew out, so would have seen closer to 37, 38 if it was good to go, if it was a close game. As you can see, he was having a pretty solid start there of November into December, and obviously had that injury. So I don't mind getting into Kyrie there at 8.3K, even though it's Luka's team. Well, those two back, not much interest in any of these other guys besides maybe a Lively, who can have some random big pop-off games there. Otherwise, it's just the main two guys. Moving on to Chicago versus the Knicks. Chicago, obviously, we know the offense is going to be coming from DeRozan and Kobe White. Once again, I think Kobe White is too cheap here for his usage. His upside, 7.6K, even though it's in a slow matchup against the Knicks. DeRozan's a fine play. I don't love the price tag. Don't love the price tag either for Drummond, even though he's massive upside. It just can't stay out of foul trouble if he can. He does have massive upside. The rest of the team there, Crusoe and Pat Williams, I think are fine plays. Same thing with Io. Nothing too crazy stands out to me here. That's really it. Moving on to the New York Knicks, Brunson, Randall, do feel a little bit too pricey for me. They're fine. Hartenstein's there. OG, did foul out, but he played 35 minutes, so he was pretty aggressive, 12 shots. I think he's probably the best point per dollar play for me on the Knicks side for this slates here. Hart there, once again, it's just hard to trust him, but he's coming at a fine price tag. DiVincenzo had a solid game that last game as well, 15 points, but yeah, nothing too crazy there. Really, my only interest is going to be in OG, and then Precious. I think it's a fine, cheap dart throw. Only played 9 minutes, but maybe he sees a little bit more there um, for tomorrow. Moving on to Detroit here for the Detroit side. K looks, he's been fantastic. Obviously, when I play him, this dude was going for like, 13, 36. He was going for like 30 fantasy points, 22, 34. And then when I don't play him, he's going for like 60 bombs, consecutively. It's just like, come on, dude. But yeah, good matchup here against Utah. Cade looks really, really strong at 8.5K. Duran, I have a lot of interest in him. Looks like he's finally shaking that ankle injury. Obviously, if there's no blowout, he should see mid 30s minutes. As you can see, he has massive upside 41, 37, 43 when he's seen mid 30s minutes or more. So you just need this game to stay close. And if it does, really like the upside there for Duran. Absolute beast. Bogdan's coming in at a very cheap price tag. Minutes are all over the place. But once again, if this game stays close, he should have very, very solid upside. And he's playing a ton of minutes. So good amount of interest in those two guys. They seem pretty cheap for their usage and upside. The rest of the team, I do have interest in Ivy. Once again, these guys do feel a little bit too cheap for their price tags and kind of their upside and usage. Once again, good matchup here against Utah, but can this game stay close? If it can, I do like the upside in the price tags for all three of those guys. Moving on to Utah here. Markkanen's a very, very cheap price tag for him. It does feel like a lot of these top guys are pretty cheap on the board. He's a little bit scoring dependent at times, but once again, he can absolutely rip off and go for like a 50, 60 bomb. So really like him. Sexton, Men's are slowly trending down. Clarkson had that historic triple-double for them. They haven't had it since 2008, something crazy like that. Once again, don't have a ton of interest in these guys. They're all kind of okay, coming in at fine price tags, but no one really feels too out of place. They're kind of run those guys a ton of minutes. 11, 10 guys, about 20 to 25 minutes. So nothing too crazy jumps out. Really just Lowry for me. Then moving on to the last game here, Clippers versus Suns. Should be a good game to watch here, late night hammer. But on the Clippers side here, with a fully healthy team, I think Kawhi and Paul George are fine. Contrarian options, secondary options. Zubac, decent GPP option. We know the upside is there with him. That's really it. Don't think you need to get cute with anyone else on this team. And then moving on to the Suns here. Kevin Durant looks like he's still out for the Clippers game here. So we'll get Booker. We'll get Beal leading this team. I have a good amount of interest in Beal. 34 minutes. That last game should be around 35 minutes as well. 6.9K. They're going to need him to score and play make. So that's a pretty cheap price tag for Beal when he needs to do that stuff. And he's point guard, shooting guard eligible. So I have a good amount of interest in him. Booker is very cheap here. Obviously, tough matchup going against this team, the Clippers, but he should see huge minutes, should see huge usage. So they both look really, really solid. Nurkic, solid in the mid-range. Don't mind him. Grayson Allen and Gordon should step up offensively, but they're priced about right. And that's really it. Eubanks is a fine dart throw, but his minutes weren't great that other game. That's really it. They did say Bobo will get some minutes, played 20, but obviously blew out, so he saw a lot more than he usually should. Or well, so nothing too crazy there. But yeah, as you guys can see, there's a lot of guys who are kind of coming at their lowest price tags of the season. So I do think, as you can see here, really like going that balanced mid-range approach, just because there's a lot of guys that have huge upside if they can have solid to pretty solid games. So I don't think there's a need to spend up for a stud, but if you want to, I do think Halburn's coming in is probably one of the best spend ups against that Milwaukee defense, who is Swiss cheese right now, letting them up some of the most. I think they're like the top 5 for the most wide open shots that they let up. So once again, hope you guys like the video. Hit that like button. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.